Thanks for leaving the kitchen and watching us. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, primaries, caucuses, polls, and debates. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump win in Nevada, heading for Super Tuesday. Good news and bad news from Milwaukee. The Air and Water Show was canceled for 2016, but a major manufacturing company headed by the former CEO of Bucyrus moves its headquarters here. But we start with the latest Marquette University law poll that found tight races for the presidential nominations and the state Supreme Court. The presidential primary and the general election are both on April 5th. On the GOP side, the poll found Donald Trump leading, but also strong support for both Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. On the Democratic side, a toss-up with Bernie Sanders edging Hillary Clinton by just 1 point. The poll sample, which leaned toward Democrat voters, also found Sanders running stronger in the November matchups. Clinton runs even with both Rubio and Cruz, clobbers Donald Trump, but the poll found that the self-proclaimed socialist Sanders would run the table, leading all of the possible GOP challengers by double digits. In the race for state Supreme Court, the poll basically found a tie between incumbent Justice Rebecca Bradley and challenger Judge Joanne Kloppenberg. Joining me on our panel this morning, defense attorney Dan Adams, former state representative Michelle Litjens, political strategist Lynne DeBruin, and the managing editor of RightWisconsin.com, Collin Roth. So this poll seems to at least highlight, let's stick with the Democratic side here, some significant weeknesses for Hillary Clinton. Wisconsin is not Hillary country, is it? No, I'm asking you.
Oh, you're asking me.
I'm not going to let you dodge this one.
I'm not trying to dodge it. No, I think that what we're seeing with Wisconsin Democrats right now is mirrored in the Chris Abele primary election, where the more left wing of the Democratic Party helped Larson beat Abele, and I think that's the wing that is supporting Bernie Sanders. But unlike in the Republican race, where just because you, when you drop out of the race, all the votes don't go to a certain candidate, I think in this case, if Hillary Clinton wins through a lot of the contests through March, a lot of those folks might come back over. So I think it's more up in the air about whether they'll stay with Sanders all the way through or not.
I actually think you're honest thing. I really get the sense that the Democratic Party in Wisconsin has always been to the left of the Democratic Party nationally, but they seem to be moving hard left, and I think you're seeing that both locally and statewide. But I was really struck here, Dan Adams, by the fact that you have Bernie Sanders with these huge leads, which means that there are some voters who will say, I will vote for Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio against Hillary Clinton, but I would vote for Bernie Sanders if he was the nominee. But who are these people?
I don't understand that. Other than Hillary Clinton is a very well-known commodity, and with that, she has a higher ceiling, or excuse me, a floor of negative, and people who just won't vote for her for whatever reason, personal reasons, stylistic reasons. Let's not forget that the margin of error in this poll is 7.5%, and they're within a percentage point, so statistically they're tied.
Okay, let's talk about this. This is a sample that's skewed Democratic, and the Democrats win in virtually everything. You know, you have Russ Feingold still with the lead over Ron Johnson. But I guess I am still struck by the weakness of Hillary Clinton in a state that you would think should be a relatively easy win given the current environment.
But not really when you look at the core supporters of Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton does better in states with higher minority populations, and Wisconsin has a pretty small minority population. So your far left, liberal-leaning, socialist, desiring liberals are leaning towards Bernie Sanders.
Well, you're also seeing a very interesting division in different parts of the state, different demographics, that, Hillary Clinton, leads in the Milwaukee area by a pretty big margin. She gets just annihilated in Madison. How did they break down in Green Bay? I'm trying to remember. I think that was that Hillary country up there?
It was pretty close. But, I think increasingly the Democratic Party in Wisconsin has become Madison and Milwaukee-centric, and probably even tips in a different way towards Madison, which is very, very progressive, and you see what's going on. Lynn mentioned the Milwaukee County executive race here, that the progressive wing of the party in Milwaukee is emboldened, engendered, gaining momentum. So I think you see some of that takeover of the party in those two urban areas.
Okay, now on the state Supreme Court, you basically have a tie, low numbers for both candidates. Now, under normal circumstances, I would give the edge to the conservative candidate because the electorate in Wisconsin, even when they vote for liberals, like to have conservative judges. On the other hand, we don't know what the turnout is going to be. If there is a huge Democratic turnout, if the Bernie-Hillary thing is still alive, and there is, not a big Republican turnout. Who knows what will happen? On the other hand, this Republican race may not be over by April 5th. So, I don't know what's going to determine this, but how big an impact is the presidential race going to have on the Supreme Court race?
The presidential primary is going to decide who's going to win the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. There's no doubt about it, depending on if the Republicans haven't decided or the Democrats haven't decided. But like you had mentioned, it's nice to see so far that both candidates are not well known in the state. So if Justice Bradley's campaign does their job and they go out and define who Joanne Kloppenberg really is and what she believes, I think Justice Bradley's going to win. Okay,
we're going to talk about the Republican race in the next segment. What has your glass half full? What has your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams, you are first.
Well, my glass is half full because President Obama is doing the right thing in vetting moderate candidates to fill Justice Scalia's vacant Supreme Court seat. My glass is half empty because Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval was mentioned briefly this week as a potential nominee, but sadly withdrew himself from consideration. Sandoval, a former federal judge, could have broken the Gordian knot of filling that vacant seat, leaving our country better off.
Michelle Litjens.
My glass is half full because Enbridge would like to build a $2.6 billion pipeline from North Dakota to Wisconsin, which would create jobs and protect the environment from potential train derailments. It is half empty because Minnesota's environmentalists are delaying it once again until 2019.
Lynne DeBruin.
On a lighter note, my glass is half full because the Oscars are tonight, and they are always fun to watch. But my glass is half empty because for the second year in a row, the Oscar winners will be an all-white cast.
Collin Roth.
Well, my glass is half full because Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio managed to put away their daggers and focus on pummeling Donald Trump at last week's debate. It's half empty because I fear it might be too little, too late.
I basically have the same thing. My glass is half full because Marco Rubio turned in a strong debate performance Tuesday night, finally exposing Donald Trump as a fraudulent fat cat who preys on the weak and the vulnerable. It's half empty because, as Collin said, it may have been too little, too late. Next on Sunday Insight, do the negatives outweigh the positives for Donald Trump here in Wisconsin? And as we go to break, our Insight Countdown shows Super Tuesday is just 2 days away. Ohio, Florida, Illinois, Missouri, and North Carolina hold their primaries in just 16 days. And the Wisconsin primary is 37 days away. We will be right back. Donald Trump is leading in the polls nationally and in the Super Tuesday states and here in Wisconsin. But there were some warning signs in the new Marquette University poll. Put simply, Trump is by far the most unpopular candidate on the ballot for either party. Net favorability means subtracting negative ratings from positive ratings. Bernie Sanders, is the most popular with a net favorability rating of plus 11. Hillary Clinton has a net favorability rating of minus 18. But Donald Trump has a net rating of minus 43. Within the GOP, Marco Rubio has a net approval rating of plus 47, Cruz plus 46. But Trump is actually underwater among Republicans, with more Republicans saying they disapprove of him than approve of him. Look at these numbers. The Marquette poll found that 72% of women voters disapprove of Trump. That means that his approval rating is just 18%. Putting him 54 points underwater among women. Michelle Litjens, you Republicans are about to nominate this guy?
Oh, do not look at me for nominating this guy. Yeah. There are not enough angry white men out there to elect Donald Trump. Yeah. We know this. We know that, again, you just cited the number about how many people disapprove of this man. He has worse approval ratings than Hillary Clinton. Yeah. And we know that, 41% of the people out there don't like Hillary Clinton. Yeah. He can't win.
But we might be on the verge, sitting right here, of him running the table, becoming the
nominee, but that does not mean he's going to be elected president.
I understand that, but a lot of Republicans seem to be under the impression that he can beat Hillary Clinton, that he is electable.
But they are not paying attention to reality. They're not even listening to what the man says. They just want to hear someone who wants to fix it. They don't want to be part of the establishment, and so they're not paying attention to the reality.
Now, Wisconsin, I think, is a little bit different because his lead in the polls here is not as dominant as is in some other states. In fact, in this media market, in the Milwaukee market, he's only getting about 26% of the vote. And I think there's a number of reasons for that, including the fact that, we're Midwesterners. We have a sort of different kind of conservatism. Maybe it's talk radio land. land. But this is really not Trump country, is it?
Not quite. And I guess if Wisconsin was a Super Tuesday state or in the next week or so, I'd say Trump was probably going to win. But I think this race is still a month out. A lot could change. Candidates could shift. Candidates could drop out. We could have some more debates, and attacks could really sink in at some point.
And Wisconsin could actually be one of the key states, because by the end of March, 60% of the Republican delegates will be assigned. But most of the Republican primaries and caucuses in March do proportional delegations. So the chances of Trump actually having 50.1 or 50 plus 1 is actually pretty small when you do the math. So the bottom line is it could be early April, and this race could still be between Trump and a second contender, or even potentially still a third, depending on what happens in March.
I mean, obviously, what we saw last week was a new phase of this campaign. It is down to a three-man race. I don't think. Kasich and Carson are there. And I think you saw a couple of things. Number one, you saw that Cruz and Rubio were willing to step back from attacking one another. They both win at Donald Trump. They are also aggressively calling out Donald Trump's record. I think that Rubio had a very, very strong debate. I don't know that's going to be enough to affect this Tuesday, but I agree with you. I think it goes to April. But again, from a Democratic point of view, you're looking at Donald Trump. How do Democrats feel about Donald Trump as the Republican nominee? I'm just curious.
I think early on we were kind of gleeful about, oh, this could be really good for us. We could run the table nationally and have almost a realignment period if he's top of the ticket and nobody wants to rally behind him. At this point, though, I think there is frankly an existential threat to the Republic that this guy could actually be the president of the United States. So
how does that happen? Because I'm looking at these numbers and going, he's got an 80% disapproval rating among Hispanics. You have a massive disapproval rating among African Americans, and to have these kinds of numbers among women, how do you put together an electoral?
He wins obviously the nomination, and then something happens to Hillary Clinton. Either she has a health issue or something like that.
Or some big scandal.
Okay, you can explain.
There's one thing that is uniting Americans on all sides, and it's anger, and nobody gives voice to that anger better than Donald Trump. In many ways, if you think about what the frustration in this country is about, if Donald Trump is on a stage with Hillary Clinton is the establishment, the status quo. Donald Trump, in many ways, hasn't gone to the right in a Republican Party. He's moved to the center on trade, on foreign policy, on a number of issues, and he could be sitting in not a terrible spot.
If he gets the nomination, will there be a third or a fourth party?
I think so.
On
the Republican side.
I think there will be. You may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Dan Adams, you're first.
My advice is for Milwaukee journalists. Someone asked State Senator Chris Larson why it took him 8 years to graduate college. He wasn't working his way through. 8 years for a bachelor's degree is outrageous. He should produce his transcript.
That's the best we got there. Michelle.
Senator Rubio, please keep hammering Trump. You are on a roll, and we can't afford to have Trump as the Republican nominee.
Lynne DeBruin.
On a non-political note, if you have an elderly family member with a physical illness, diminishing mental abilities, financial problems, or who's just lonely, make sure they aren't being scammed by con artists who mail personalized letters or call by phone promising help or continued contact if they're sent money.
Collin Roth.
To Republicans in Wisconsin, only one of the top 3 Republican candidates for president loses to Hillary Clinton by double digits. Only one candidate has 2 out of every 3 voters disapproving him. Only one has 3 out of every 4 women disapproving of him. Don't nominate Donald Trump.
Well, my advice is to U.S. Senate Republicans, the fight over the Supreme Court is a fight worth having. The stakes are simply too high. You cannot afford to cave in on this. Next on Sunday Insight, the race for the top job in Wisconsin's largest city. Crime is up, poverty is up, the city's test scores are abysmal. The conventional wisdom seems to be that Mayor Tom Baer is the heavy favorite to be reelected, even in a year in which voters across the country are expressing their unhappiness with the status quo. Why? What is going on in Milwaukee?
I think there was a voice of some anger with the status quo. Tom Baer only had 45% in the primary, but you'd think the guy with the most momentum was Bob Donovan, who came out of the primary. His momentum came to a dead stop this week with the pretty salacious Dan Bice article about these past allegations, not just the bathroom thing, but also the community development block grant charge that happened
but
in the 2000s.
you're talking about an incident that occurred in a bathroom and then in a men's room at UWM in 1992.
I agree. There's something weird about the coverage, but it was there. It happened. Voters, their introduction to Bob Donovan was that.
Okay, now you were sitting in for me, Collin, on Wednesday on my talk show. You asked the question, will that affect people? What was your sense?
Yeah, my sense is it kind of depends on who you support in the race, whether you're for Barrett or whether you're for Donovan. Everybody admits the story is kind of weird and unseemly in many ways, but I think what's so unfortunate is this community really deserves a debate on so many important issues, from education to public safety to infrastructure to the schools and economic development and poverty and opportunity. There are so many issues. If we're going to be deciding an election based on an incident from 1992, that's a disservice to this community.
You know, even regardless of about that incident, which I frankly do think it certainly helps stop his momentum. I don't know whether a lot of his current supporters will fall away, but it certainly will hurt him in gaining momentum. But we need to remember that no alderman has won the mayoralship of Milwaukee against an incumbent sitting mayor in all of the city's history. So Donovan and Joe Davis, back when he was in the race, had a huge mountain to climb. And you know, Donovan has some positives, but he also has some negatives. And the bottom line is that makes Barrett very, very difficult to beat.
Yeah, and I also thought, just a little tidbit, it's kind of an insider thing, the fact that Bob Donovan is paying somebody $27,000 to manage the Twitter and the Facebook account. You know, you kind of wonder about, I don't know the priorities and what kind of a campaign he's going to run.
It's a very disappointing campaign. He had so many opportunities to actually talk about the issues that Collin brought up. Milwaukee has some serious issues that need to be addressed, and he had that opportunity.
Okay, Lynn mentioned the county executive's race before. I was really struck by what happened at the debate earlier this week. State Senator Chris Larson accuses Chris Abele of wanting to take over and fix these failing schools, these schools of which not one student, has learned how to read. And Abele's response was, no, absolutely, that's not true. I do not intend to take over and save those failing schools. Is this the state of politics, that even showing an interest in fixing these failing schools is now politically toxic, Dan Adams?
No, it should be. It should be the main issue that every local leader in Milwaukee is talking about and taking on. And if that's the hill to die on, I say die on that hill, because it's worth the fight.
But then why is no one doing it?
It's very sad.
That's the point. It is very sad that not one person. Again. It's an accusation. You want to fix these failing schools. No, I don't want to fix these failing schools. Wow, Milwaukee. What is it you don't get? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams, you're first.
Charlie, I don't get why a veteran's ID card issued by the VA still doesn't suffice for Wisconsin's voter ID law. Republicans should absolutely be ashamed by this law and fix it now.
Michelle Litjens.
Well, Charlie, I don't get where Milwaukee County is going to come up with $184 million for a new courthouse.
Yes, you do. Lynne DeBruin.
Well, what I don't get are the values of the University of Tennessee's football team. Players beat and shunned teammate Dre Bowles for helping a woman who said she'd been raped by 2 team members. And court documents claim the team's coach told Bowles he had betrayed the team by helping her.
Collin Roth.
Well, what I don't get is why it wasn't a bigger news when Senator Ron Johnson got Secretary of State John Kerry to admit that he would never allow himself or his employees to use an unsecured private server for official business. Hear that, Hillary?
Yeah, I'm along the same lines as Michelle. Now, Milwaukee faces a $500 million tab to replace lead water pipes. Replacing the Mitchell Park domes may cost $70 million. A new safety building courthouse could cost $184 million. And it will cost about $60 million to keep City Hall from sinking into the ground. So what I don't get is why we don't have money for that kind of basic maintenance, but we have enough money for a shiny new trolley. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Dan Adams, you're first.
My winner, Apple. The company continues to fight the government's unprecedented attempt to force them to create new software to breach the security of their iPhones, effectively compromising the privacy of every single one of their customers worldwide. Good for them. My loser is now former University of Missouri Professor Melissa Click. You know, the "can we get some muscle over here" lady who threatened a student journalist during a protest on her campus last year. She's been fired.
Michelle Litjens.
You'll appreciate this. But my winners are the UW-Madison basketball team. After losing Coach Bo Ryan, many of us thought the year was lost, but you kept on going, now beat Michigan today. My losers are Apple executives. They won't disable a phone for the FBI because it would violate their principles, but they accepted censorship in China. I guess principles go out the window when there's money on the table.
Lynne DeBruin.
Well, Bernie Sanders is my Wisconsin winner for handily beating all of the Republican candidates in the latest Marquette poll, while Hillary Clinton is my national winner for regaining her momentum. The Republican establishment is my loser for spending years courting their extreme right wing in order to have a viable majority. It didn't occur to the GOP that the angry crazies might actually take over. Well, it's happening, and the GOP now has to risk a party meltdown to stop Donald Trump or watch him win the nomination when they know he's not a conservative, and worst of all, has a volatile temperament that makes him unsafe to serve as commander-in-chief.
Collin Roth.
Well, my winner this week is Russ Feingold because he managed to rewrite history about his own judicial obstruction, filibustering Alito, and is claiming he wasn't partisan at all when considering conservative judicial nominees. Democrats sure got it good. My loser this week is Chris Christie. You really sold your soul to Donald Trump? Really?
There's a donut in there somewhere. My loser, voters who in November may be faced with a choice between voting for a New York liberal supporter of socialized medicine, Planned Parenthood, and higher taxes, or voting for Hillary Clinton. My winner, a young woman named Grace Jagler, who is pursuing the American dream by starting her own business, Gracie's Doggy Delights, which sells freeze-dried dog treats. Grace has Down syndrome, and with the help of her parents is proving that having special needs does not necessarily mean a life of dependency. And by the way, my dogs love the treats, especially the turkey hearts. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.